There's this story that's trending this morning, and I know you've done a lot more research in the last hour or so since we've been off Morning Blend.
Yes.
But talk about what is going on in Missouri with an AR-15 being part of a raffle prize, right?
It's wild.
Yeah.
So this is a third grade baseball team, a bunch of nine-year-old kids. They decided that for their baseball program, and Rob tells me this is not that crazy, they're going to auction off an AR-15 rifle, the same rifle that was used in the Florida shooting. And I thought that this was strange. And I think a lot of people on social media think this is strange, but it's also not the only instance of this happening. Here in Cameron Park, a fire department did the same sort of thing, auctioning off an AR-15 rifle. Now, the fire department has since decided that that is not a wise or culturally smart move at this time. Insensitive, one might say. But the baseball team decided that they're still going to go forward with this auction of the AR-15 rifle, putting more guns into the streets. How do we feel about this?
Okay, so there was a moment in the movie, Michael Moore movie, Bowling for Columbine.
Okay.
And I believe he won an Oscar for that one. So it's not, you know, you may have opinions about the movie, but as far as, you know, the Academy voted on that one, they felt like that was the best documentary of the year. And there's a famous scene in there where there is a gun auction. And so he brings that up, had the same sort of gut reaction. Isn't this weird after this tragedy that you would do something like this? But I think it's a little bit more simple than that. I don't think that this was started because of what happened in Florida or other things. Now, as far as a culture, we're all thinking about where we stand on assault rifles, if this is a good thing, a bad thing. You know, everyone's going to have their own sort of range on where they think about that.
For sure.
But I will tell you, I've lived in many what would be considered red states. I've lived in Montana. I've lived in Mississippi. Gun culture is just something. It's just everywhere.
It's part of it. It's part like owning a fancy car, right? It's
exactly. And a gun is something that in some of these states, in some of these communities, culturally, it would be the same thing as auctioning off a car, a bicycle, a motorcycle. It's just something that is not very controversial in these communities because many people have them, many people use them, many people fall on the same side of the Second Amendment issue. And yeah, exactly. So, you know, if you're not from those places or haven't spent a lot of time there, it seems kind of tone deaf. It seems kind of strange, especially that it's considered it's to raise money for youth sports. Exactly. Well, so that's understandable because here's the other thing too. The United States is a very diverse place, and where people stand on weapons, there's a huge divide. People will come at this issue. Usually, it's an urban experience or suburban versus a rural, and how you feel about firearms. Because you know, I lived in Montana for a while, and having a weapon is something that is very, very common. They have the rifle rack in the back of the trucks, and for many opportunity or for many moments that you're living in a rural place out on a ranch, you actually kind of need a weapon because you are raising livestock. You are dealing with. They have wolves. I mean, it sounds crazy. But
I get that.
Yeah,
I get that.
Yeah, if you're in suburban, you know, Southern California or whatever, this makes no sense why you would need to. But in some of these places, they identify with a gun as a tool that they use often to get what they need to get done, and that's the perspective from places that are very rural.
Sure. I get that, but regardless of where you are right now in the nation, this story has affected you or impacted you, and you feel some sort of way about it and understand that it can be perceived as insensitive. And I just think the timing of this is all wrong. And then to double down on the coach's behalf, and his name is Levi Peterson, to double down and say that I'm going to continue with this fundraiser, even though there's so much backlash, there are plenty of ways to raise money. And no matter where you are in the country.
And we keep mentioning, because of what's happened recently, we know that weapon, an AR-15, was used by a 19-year-old in a legal situation where this gun was legally in his possession, but he used that weapon to kill 17 innocent people at his old high school. This was in Florida. This happened last week. You guys we're at this point, we've heard about this story, but that's why you're mentioning, that's why we're saying, okay, yes, a bit tone deaf. Now there's another story, and this is the one that I came across, and this is in Michigan. And it says, at a charity dinner to raise money for a high school football team. This was a high school level. Yours was at an elementary level? Okay. Well, the booster club behind this football program said we're going to do the opposite of what the coach you're talking about is doing. And we're going to lift this, and we're going to take this AR-15 raffle prize out of our just the option here, because it just doesn't seem appropriate. So there are two different ways of handling it. The fact, though, that a weapon at this level was going to be auctioned off isn't necessarily uncommon across the country. He is what Rob is saying, which I get. The right to bear arms, and for a lot of people, guns have been passed down generation to generation. It's a possession it's a prized possession. Not something that's been around in my family, but you have to understand from the other side of the country.
Right, and what's different about this is that this is a national conversation that everybody's having. What my curiosity is that how is this being received in whatever town this is in Missouri? You know, the idea is that there's this outrage from the country, and that may be true, or it's at least controversial in the United States, because they're descending on this community and how they probably had that same raffle a dozen times.
Right.
Because the AR-15 rifle in Missouri, probably in a small town in Missouri, I don't know, I'm assuming things. Remember, I'm the weather guy. But that's just something that's desirable, people want, it's a very common thing. It would be, and forgive me, it would be like auctioning off a bike in Portland or something like that. You know what I mean? Something that's it's culturally, it's desirable, it's common, and people, they're just trying to raise money.
Right. But here's the thing. This gun was auctioned off by one of the parents of the children on that baseball team. The company it came from is Black Rain Ordnance, Inc. And I went to their Facebook page to see how people are sounding off in that town. I would assume now that the story has been picked up nationally. Right. It could be anyone commenting on this. Right. But I just wanted to read to you some of the comments that they have. And one of them is saying, you guys used to market these tools, referring to the gun, as assault rifles. Why don't you do that anymore? Did you get bad press? Are their optics not looking good? That's one side. And then we have people saying that, oh no, this isn't even a different side, it's the same side. Monsters, your God is money. Third graders selling raffle tickets for a chance to win an assault weapon. That's blood money. What would Jesus do? Just people can be upset. They are upset about something like this. I guess
it's what is the education going behind behind these raffle prizes, right? I hope, I would only pray that if a kid is learning about guns at an early age in different parts of the country, they're learning about gun safety in the same breath. Because at that point, then it's okay. It's just like having a vehicle when you get into an accident or something. Someone was making this argument, yes, that car killed all of these people. Is it the car's fault or is it the driver's fault? And yes, while in the situation it may have been both, I would just hope that there is some level of education to know that this is not a toy. Right. This is not a toy.
And that's a good question, though.
I don't know. I don't know. Do these kids, what kind of education is instilled in them at a young age?
And if it's for third graders, they may not be aware whatsoever.
Parents are just out there doing what they can for the money.
This is something that's among parents and the public, but it reminds me of another thing that I experienced firsthand. As a weather guy, I cover fires, right? And some of these are started accidentally. I've seen this a couple times. A fire department will actually sell fireworks as a fundraiser. And
interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember covering this. There was a fire department in Grover Beach, California.
Okay.
So this is Central Coast, and they had a fireworks stand, and they were selling fireworks to raise money. Okay. And I also saw it again in Arizona. And the one in Arizona, that particular year, they had a huge fire season early. So, you sell fireworks for the 4th of July, but their fire season, it was somewhere in May or June. There's already some big fires. So everyone was concerned. Fire department went out. And ultimately, they decided not to go forward with the fundraiser.
Good job.
Because of not that they're not allowed, or not that they don't believe that in that interaction with the public, right? So if you have a firefighter selling you fireworks, that is their moment to actually say, look, these are legal. Right. You can use these, but I'm going to be responding to this if you do this not in a safe way. So there was a moment for them to sort of interact with the public, but ultimately they felt that there was too much controversy. People were going to stay away. They're just trying to raise money. Right. So it was too hot of an issue for them.
So Janine Davis-Scogan says, some keep mentioning that the kids shouldn't have anything to do with the gun, and they don't. It is a gift or a prize for the adults, something known and common for their area. Good point, Janine. Thank you for chiming in.
Abraham Saleh says, who cares? Everyone is offended by everyone and everything that everyone does. Get over it and stop people shaming. That's one way to look at it, Abraham. Not the way I look at it.
Lavana Engel, Funbuena, when is it the appropriate time to raffle the gun then? Never, according to y'all. So she's saying, when is it? Is it right after a situation like this where an AR-15 kills, or well, the person behind the AR-15 kills the 17 people? Or do we let it die down after a couple of weeks and then say, okay, now's the appropriate time? It's a good question. Is it ever a good time? We have the right to bear arms.
We do have the right to bear arms, but why in Sacramento? I don't know how far Cameron Park is from here. So
not far.
Okay.
We're talking here as in downtown
massive
area.
animals running around that you would need an AR-15 to shoot down. It just seems like an odd place to have a raffle like that. Not saying it's not fitting in the town of Missouri where this is happening, but there are so many ways to make money in a raffle.
Right. And
so many. Why put more guns on the street?
Right. And that would be, I would say, probably the most popular argument against something like this, because it's not, you're not talking about weapons or anything like that. You're just saying, is there a better choice to raise money? That's not controversial, because let's just say, if people that don't have a problem with it, sure, I'll buy some tickets, but people that otherwise would have donated, they stay away from this because they share your belief. So now they're losing money because they decided to choose ostensibly such a controversial item. I mean, a bike, a Yeti cooler. I mean, there's lots of things that have value that everybody likes that would definitely raise money.
And here's the thing. I think that it desensitizes people and jades people to thinking that guns are everywhere and that they're normal to see. We don't live in a society where our military walks around all day, every day, toting around big artillery guns everywhere like they do in Europe. And so I think there's a level of protection and a barrier that our children have in America that we should maintain, where they feel the sense of security, and it's not because the guns are providing that security, it's because the people around them are creating an environment where they feel safe. And if we start desensitizing little kids to what guns are and what they do in a raffle sort of way, which is very fun and playful, I think that's just setting the wrong tone. Right.
I mean, it's just the gun issue just immediately sets people off because people have very strongly worded beliefs. I would say this. Let's just say there's like a school fundraiser.
Okay.
You've got a private school fundraiser and someone's going to donate an item for an auction, and they decided to auction off a week at a nudist colony. Okay.
Right.
So then now all of a sudden, now you're taking yourself away from the gun debate.
Okay.
And then you can boil it down to essentially, are there some items that are inappropriate to be donated and raffled off to make money for a kid's school or for youth sports? There are some that many would see, okay, this is an item that we're not going to accept for the raffle.
Right.
But in Missouri, I'm telling you, an assault rifle, an AR-15, probably, if it's a small town, is probably not very controversial.
People are sounding off in our comments, and I just want to make one thing clear. So it's the AR-15 is not an assault rifle. Goodness gracious, the AR does not stand for assault rifle. This is Lavana saying it. So I looked up really quick. The AR, what it stands for is Armalite Rifle. This is after the company that developed it in the 1950s. AR does not stand for assault rifle or automatic rifle. This is just to clear up so you don't assume that that's what we assume.
Very often when you're talking about guns, it becomes a research in a Wikipedia glossary about all of the terms and the nuance and all that. And that is important. Important. If this is your issue, it's important to get the facts right.
Correct. Okay.
Interesting.
Terry, let's go. Whatever happened to raffling off cakes or restaurant dinners?
Amen. Or trips. At my high school, they used to send you to Florida for a week, and somebody owned a house down there, and you paid $2,500. That's one way to raise money.
Jessica Downey agreeing with you. Yes, lady, guns don't need to be everywhere, period.
Amen, Jessica.
Let's see. Carol Schilling Rogers, require a permit to purchase guns, a permit that is obtained only after passing background checks and after passing safety training. So saying that this gun shouldn't just go to anyone, which I don't know how that would even work. If to obtain that gun in a raffle, would you then, I would hope that you would have to go through some series of background checks, which is the big debate in our country now, is that is what we need to focus on, is a more extensive background check.
Right, and President Trump said something about that this morning, how he is going to
push
for more legislation in that sphere. But Lisa, who, without her choice words used in there, I hope you can clean that up later on, does explain how the process works after somebody gets a gun through a raffle. She says that if they win, they don't just get to take it home. They go through an authorized licensed gun dealer and have a background check and can be legally able to purchase that rifle. However, we're dealing with the same people. She doesn't have a lot of nice things to say, but that was a nice little tidbit from your comment. So thank you for that.
And Michelle L. Canella Travo, who's, to your point, Rob, says the Midwest is nothing like California. Try to understand, people have lots of guns there. Missouri is not as strict as California when it comes to that, which again brings up the questions: should gun laws be, or should they change a bit across the country? Because what we experience and our experience here in California is different than what they experience in the Midwest.
Right.
So how do we adjust accordingly?
And that often is what you find. You know, your people's opinions on anything is related essentially on how they grew up and their experience.
It's one view,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. And
unless, like you've traveled, you've lived there.
Right.
I've lived in Vegas. I've lived in, the South, but I was a kid, so.
Yeah, it's just, it's different. It's just viewed very, very differently. Yeah. I mean, if you live on a ranch in Montana, I would say 99% of the time you have a firearm somewhere because something may happen on that ranch, and that's the only device. If you've got, let's say you have a cow that's stuck on some barbed wire and is going through a lot of pain, the consensus of that community would be that this right thing to do would be to put the animal down, because you can't really take it to a vet. There's no vets for cattle in Montana or some of these other rural places. So it's just
other
viewed
parts
differently.
Of the country would say, oh my gosh, sinners.
So they see a rifle as, this is what I use to take care of this issue on my ranch. So then they don't see the controversy, because I would never use it for anything other than that.
I would not go shoot up
exactly.
in school and kill
for
17
this, not
people.
ever for this. So that's where that's why there's this huge divide.
In which a lot of people say it's not the gun that kills people, it's the people behind the gun that kill, or the lack of mental stability behind the gun.
There are a lot of people in our comments that disagree on a very fundamental level on guns and their influence in society from how I believe, but we definitely need to give their voices some sound here.
Okay. Yeah.
And so we have people that are saying guns are kind of like video games. And that's what we're saying. That if you put guns in front of little kids' faces, it desensitizes them to what guns do. But they're saying little kids play video games, and then in Hollywood movies, it's also doing this
celebrate. Oh, that was a good action film.
But I'm not of the world where little kids should be playing video games with all of these guns and the violence. And it speaks to a bigger picture of how you want to raise your kids and what you want to teach them. It's just tough to know how to shape that mind so that it becomes a better citizen than
in the world we
are.
live in.
Yes.
Right. In the world we live in. No, I my husband, growing up, played video games and COD, Call of Duty. It's all about.
I remember that.
And the reason why he knows the names of a lot of these guns, like he can see something and name it, is because those are the options in the video game. This is a learned thing. Does he have a desire to pick up and do something harmful? No, but in the video game, that is what it's about. Getting the gun and boom, boom, boom. Oh man, I died. Boom, boom, boom. And I'm sitting there going, no. Like, no. And before we have kids, you need to have an adopted understanding that you need to step back from a different perspective, not the kid growing up playing it, but how this could shape the mind. So he doesn't play it. He doesn't have it in our household. And I would hope that, maybe it's more about, I don't know, Mario Kart in our household if it's games, but COD, it's such a part of people's lives.
You got to be careful with kids and technology because, so as you get older, a brand new experience just adds onto the pile you've already had.
Yeah.
But when you're young, every new experience is kind of a big deal. And you'll see young kids, if they're really into some cartoon, they know every episode, they know all the characters.
Right.
They'll be playing in the backyard, they're talking to their friend, these magical unicorns and these things, and it's because those things are very important to them, and they know that they're a cartoon, but they have a very strong connection to it. So if you introduce some of these things too early, then it has an outsized role in their life and their experience
and I think the
compared to
desensitizing,
everything else.
It comes to that. Not to say that if they grow up and they're in a very mental state, if they grow up, they're going to have that intrigue to want to own a gun. They know, like, these are new at a young age. It's not a toy, but it's accepted at the video game level. But it does desensitize where you like going around and shooting things is sort of like, when I hear it, because I didn't grow up playing it, I'm like, this, like, it makes my heart rate go fast. Like, what are you listening to? And you're just sitting there thinking it's not a big deal. It's the same thing. My little cousin, it's not the same in the sense that it's guns, but growing up playing video games, he played a lot of the car video games. Going around and like, well, he now has his permit and he's taking his student teaching. What do they call it? Behind the wheel?
Right.
And he's in Rancho Cucamonga. And my cousin said the other day he's driving. Okay, imagine yourself at approaching an intersection where there is a red light, or excuse me, a green light, but someone is going to make a right turn. You always pause, right? And you wait for the yield. So he said, my cousin said that she's my older cousin, this is her son. He's driving, sees that person stop, goes and just goes all the way around him, makes the right, doesn't ever stop. She's like, it was as if he was playing a video game.
That's scary.
And to him, it was like, oh yeah, this isn't a video game. That's right. But grew up playing it, so you have to like get out of that mindset, especially when it's the first time behind the wheel or the first time, I don't know, seeing a gun in real life. To go, oh, this is simple. Like, just do what I did in video games. Scary. Desensitizing. Okay. I understand that.
I love this.
Shall we?
I love all the comments.
We understand that it's controversial, which is why we're talking about it.
Exactly. But what I don't want you guys to misunderstand is that at this point, we understand that in Missouri, this is a normal thing. And we're not judging the people of Missouri for what works for them. I'm saying it was shocking to me to hear that this was happening, not knowing the history of what Missouri does. And even just thinking about it happening so close to Sacramento, where we shoot the show.
It just sort of shocked you.
It is shocking to me. But seeing all of these comments where people support this raffle and what the coach is doing, it just lets me know there are more people out there that just think differently than I do. And that's okay.
And that's okay. Douglas Sterling.
Even Missouri is a huge mix of urban and rural. I mean, there's big cities in Missouri, and they would probably have
different
if you average if you average the viewpoint, which is impossible to do, but I would imagine there's a difference of opinion just within the state.
Douglas Sterling just uses 3 words: arm the teachers, going back to what happened in Florida and what we should do next. And there were a couple of articles I read over the weekend that brought a different perspective, because for a second, everyone wants a quick fix. You think like, okay, maybe that's part of the solution, arming the teachers. Because what, someone who can bring down someone with a bad person with the gun is a good person with the gun, that whole mentality. But then I was at my alma mater, my high school, over the weekend, and you're around a lot of teachers, and they're we aren't trained. That's not our responsibility is to help hone these minds and help make them great citizens. Now I have an added level of responsibility to A, know how to use a gun the proper way, B, make sure it's always locked up and make sure no accidents ever happen. See, now I put my life, I give so much for your kids. Now my life is expected to be on the line as well. Like probably in that situation I would do that, but now that I'm expected, it just brings them a whole layer. And now people may say, we already have a teacher shortage. Now to say, I'm not even going to go down that route, because I don't also want to be on the front lines if there should be a school shooting. It just brought a different perspective of teachers don't necessarily want that responsibility.
I have a lot of teacher friends, and one point that I didn't think of before is, how would the government afford this? There are so many schools, at least where I grew up, and I know we're fighting this issue here too, where people can't afford extra paper, pencils, crayons. And teachers have to pay for this. How in the world would school districts afford licensed training, getting the arms, getting the firearms, providing them to the student or to the teachers? It's just not realistic. It is not realistic.
But I understand why you're bringing that up, because Douglas, it has been something that people think should happen, and maybe it will. We're not sure. It's just our stance on it.
I think it seems to make a lot of sense if you think about it for 3 seconds.
3 seconds, maybe 3.5.
Right, but it becomes much more complicated. I worked in Arizona, and there was a shooting of a congresswoman, Gabby Giffords, by Jared Loeffner, at a meet and greet outside of a grocery store.
You were there at the time?
I was not. I was in Arizona at the time. My wife actually worked in Tucson at the time, but she was at home in Phoenix. But the second that happened, she had to go to Tucson to work, and then I went to my station in Phoenix, and we worked on this. I'm the weather guy, but we all went in. It was such a big deal when it happened. This was an assassination attempt on a sitting congressperson.
Wow.
But anyway, there was a person that had a permit and had a weapon, at the grocery store and heard the commotion to come out. And the reason why that person had the weapon was in case this were ever to happen, they were going to stop it. But they made a decision in the moment that it was too chaotic and too crazy and did not want to add that because there was no clear line of sight to the suspect. There was a lot going on. These things happened very quickly. And then before he could think about it too much further, that person was tackled and held to the ground, and then he rushed in. And so, yes, it makes sense. This is a bad thing. This can stop it. Problem solved. But you have to spend, the world is gray. There's all these circumstances. Let's just say that you have a bad person with the gun and a pretty good person with the gun.
Right.
You don't really know in those moments. Law enforcement shows up. They don't know in the moment when they have to make these decisions. So I'm not saying that that's not the solution or I'm not criticizing if you choose to view it that way. All I'm saying is, if that's your point of view, please consider how complicated this becomes within split seconds. It's much more complicated than a simple solution. And I only know that because of someone who actually has been through it before, and that was his comments on what had to happen.
Alejandro H.L., I would rather have the campuses surrounded by a well-designed gate and have more campus supervision. We need more help on campus. So not necessarily arming teachers, but raising the number of security or whoever they have on hand to help make sure that the campus is secure. I will say that I was able to just walk onto my alma mater on Friday. I mean, I could have been anyone, but the gates are open in the morning. People walk into school. I didn't see a security guard per se. It was career day, so it was a little different, but that is scary. It's an open campus for the most part.
And there was a comment offering up the service of our veterans. They said there are over 20 million veterans that we could access. However, finding people that are allowed to work around children is a difficult thing. You have to go through many background checks. And not to say that there aren't qualified veterans that could do that job, but think about some of the experiences that veterans have had to go through and putting them in a situation around kids to have to make that split-second call when they may be suffering from PTSD or something else. That is a situation that I wouldn't want for my children.
All right. Well, a lot of you are chiming in. We're going to wrap up this conversation. I know we had other stories to get to. I want